السلام عليكم ورحمة الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Welcome everybody to the Safina Society Nothing But Facts live stream on a cold, believe it or not. First of all, it's cold because the guys who hung out here yesterday left the air conditioner on. I don't know what to do with them. I'm finding them from here on in. Like, this is simple remote control, and all you have to do is hit the off button when you leave. It's happening when you have single guys. They don't know these things. They don't know how to shut lights. They don't know how to clean up. They don't know how to shut the air conditioner off. Like, why is it that guys, I mean, I guess I was one of them too, but they're just like bums. Even the best of them, right? But girls always have their ducks in a row. Like 50% of them, I would say. They shut the light off. They tidy up. They got it together at a younger age than guys. Guys who just stay bums, right? But then they carry huge loads as men, if that, right? But that's how it has to be. Anyway, I'm just messing around. But they got to shut the air conditioner off. It's driving me nuts. Yeah, because they're not paying for it. That's why. They're not paying for it. That's why. Now you start sounding like your parents, right? You know that insurance commercial? Stop sounding like your parents. Shut the lights off. Lock the doors. What insurance company is that? There's an insurance commercial that has that. Okay, mashallah, these guys, they don't watch TV. Should Muslims have alliances or not? And I've always been against any alliances. There happens mainly, maybe, possibly, there are overlaps in one issue, maybe. But you know what else is funny, I think? Who the heck wants to align with Muslims? They're so weak. You're just imagining. When people talk about the Muslims aligned with the left, Muslims aligned with the right, I tend to think it's mostly an imagination because you don't have, what are you offering? Neither do we have a massive voting bloc, let's say here in America. England, yeah, right? Neither do we have a lot of money. So is this an alliance in your head? Is it just like something you talk about? And the reach is one way. The discussion is one way. No one on that side is catering and trying to have an alliance with our community. So when we talk about this, I really respect an article written by Sheikh Mateen Khan. Sheikh Mateen Khan is one of our neighbors in the area. He lives in the town next door, and he teaches Hanafi fiqh. And him and I do programs. We've spoken at many programs. We've have the same teachers in the past, like Sheikh Amin Muhammad is one of our common teachers in Aqidah. And Sheikh Mateen and Sheikh Mateen go way back. Sheikh Amin and Sheikh Mateen, I mean. So he says, Islam and Muslims have a long history in America and are very much part of the legacy of the United States. Muslims and non-Muslims have worked together, lived together, played together. We have constructed institutions of peace and have even fought wars together. Right? I would say Muslims have been involved in these things more so than we've done it all together, like as if we're a significant social and political body, which I don't think that we are in the United States, at least. In England, yeah, maybe. This involves collaboration. With groups whose values and teachings may be in direct opposition to Islamic ethics, morality, code, Sharia, etc. So this article attempts to guide Muslim leaders at all levels and the general Muslim public at large in a direction which benefits the national interest and protects Islam. All right, let's take a look at the fiqh. In general, Muslims and their leaders in particular need to be thinkers by assessing and reassessing individual situations. So the first thing, there are conditions in Islam, but ultimately this subject matter is ijtihadi. When do I make a deal with another group of people? If the deal entails something forbidden in Islam, then we don't need a discussion. We know that that's unlawful, right? But if it doesn't, but I'm getting cozy with a group that does other bad things or un-Islamic things, that's an ijtihadi matter. You're really just weighing right and wrong. And you may have, ultimately, at the worst case scenario, is you believe that person is upon a misguided error, not sinful, right? You think this is an error. of judgment, and it could lead to harms in the future. Speculation. That's all speculation, right? So he says here that we cannot be swept up in the euphoria of nationalism or anti-establishment rhetoric by simply following the masses or the words of a dynamic speaker. After the Prophet's migration, jurisprudence and state legislation were unified under his guidance and the guidance of several khulafa. However, since this time, the two have been separated. Islamic scholarship has been engaged in a process of risk management and the defense of Islam. Our main priority as Muslims is to be able to live, worship, and live our lives in a way pleasing to Allah. All right. And every Muslim by necessity believes that Allah Ta'ala has guided us solely for our benefit. All right. So the role of Islamic scholarship and leadership has been and continues to be charting a course that defends normative Islam through constant harm-benefit analysis. And it's been a long time that the leaders of nations and Islamic scholarships who care about the Quran have been separate. Right? Somebody once asked me recently, why is it that all the masajid operate by calculation, but yet all the madaris, all the Dar Ulums, all the Islamic seminaries, they all uphold moon sighting. Like by the book, the argument, moon sighting is the default, and these other ideas are fatawa, right? And many scholars deem these fatwa to be false fatwa, incorrect fatwa. It's a fatwa, but it could be right and wrong, and they deem it to be wrong. Well, the answer is that masajid aren't even even the masajid are not run by scholars. It's crazy. Like their executive power of the scholarly class in the ummah has shrunk so much that they do not even run the masajid anymore. They may run their zawiyah, or their Dar Ulum institutions, or their madaris. They don't even run the masajid, right? And even in Islamic countries, when they do, it's with orders. So, whenever masajid are now predominantly run by administrators. They run masajid. Not scholars may have more or less input in masajid, and Sheikh Amin runs his from top to bottom. Muhammad in Atlantic City. Alhamdulillah, MBIC gives me a lot of space, but ultimately the vast majority of masajid are just run by admins. An admin, you can't expect him to know the difference between a fatwa and a ruling, and what is the dominant opinion of the scholars on a fatwa. They're not going to know that. Can't be expected to know that. It's like if I ran a hospital, right? If I ran a hospital, I've never been through and through with doctors in the field of medicine in a way that would satisfy another doctor. So I'm going to make decisions that just make sense to me personally, and that will send a lot of doctors. It's going to be pragmatics. Doctors will be going crazy. So whenever collaboration with another group is suggested, you have to judge the harm and the benefit. All right. If there is some formal agreement, that formal agreement cannot possess anything forbidden in it. I would go even further than that, and I would say that you got to be extremely cautious even about, sentiment with these groups. Showing favorable sentiment to the right or the left or some other group, if you're a scholar, if you're a leader, your one favorable sentiment is going to sway a lot of people, right? And then they start to soften towards those ideas. And I think most people in general, tend to be sort of like one group. Like they'll take the whole thing or leave the whole thing. Very few people can etch out, yeah, I agree with this, but not this. I like what he says here, but I'm not like, most people don't do this. They accept him or reject. So that you got to keep in mind that mentality of the people you're talking to as well. So he says, for this we turn to the legal maxim, dar'ul mafasidi awla min jalb al-masalih. The prevention of harm precedes the attainment of benefits. This particular maxim is extrapolated among other things from the prophetic hadith. If I forbid you to do something, then keep away from it. If I order you to do something, do as much of it as you can. it is based on this maxim, for example, that Muslims are not permitted to make beneficial changes to their property that might cause harm to their neighbor. Some benefits me but harms my neighbor. For example, another example of those, I can't lower my prices so much in order to benefit the community in a manner that would put my neighbor out of business. And for example, in the old days, you used to have all the juicers in one area, all the butchers. That makes life easy for everybody. They could compare all the meat or compare all the clothes in one area. So it's actually, we're taught in fiqh that you're not allowed to lower your prices even to benefit society, the people, if that would cause your neighbor to go out of business, even if you just want to be charitable. So that's a halal thing that you're doing that looks good on the outside, but it harms somebody else. And even if it benefits 100 people in their single transaction of buying the meat, but it destroys another person's full livelihood. And livelihood is over a transaction, right? Livelihood is more important. So we don't judge in Islam a thing just by the intent, nor by the immediate image of what it is. It's also judged by the clear result that it's having. Now, if the result is speculative and we don't know, then that's different. But it's always good to review this and to look at these masail of ilm. All right, so he says, we may find mafsada in the form of oppression through biases, dhulm, right? Which is to place a thing where it doesn't belong. That's a definition of dhulm in the Sharia. It is to place a thing where it doesn't belong. It will be to give one something that isn't his or her right. That will be dhulm. And Allah says, Inna shirka la dhulmun azim. Why is shirk dhulm? Because it's giving an idol or a person or the sun or the moon a right, which is Allah's right. So it's putting something where it doesn't belong. All right. He says oppression, this is what's strictly and severely forbidden. The Prophet ﷺ narrates a hadith Qudsi, which means the meaning is from Allah, the wording is from the Prophet ﷺ. Memorize that. Hadith Qudsi, the meaning is from Allah, but the wording is from the Prophet, peace be upon him. That's why Hadith Qudsi sounds a little bit different from Hadith Nabawi, which sounds a little bit different from Quran. We're very different from Quran. My servants, I have made oppression unlawful for me and unlawful for you, so do not commit oppression against one another. So Allah Ta'ala has forbade oppression upon himself. And what is oppression? Oppression is not inequality. Remember, the law of this world is Allah creates things with different proportions with a wisdom. That's the law of this world. عطاؤه قسم وقضاؤه حكم. If I got that right. It's a saying, which means when Allah gives, he gives everyone in different proportion. You're taller than this person, you're wider than this person, you're smarter than this person, you had better parents than this person, you got a different, you're born in a different country, you're born in a different era, you have this kind of nose, then that's going to affect your life, these things. Each one of these little things affects your life. We can't deny that. You're born to a parent who knows how to parent well, you're born to a parent who doesn't know how to parent well. You're born with no siblings, you're born with 5 siblings. You got 4 brothers, you're going to know a lot more than a guy with no brothers, right? So on and so forth. You're the last child of the family, so you get away with murder. You're the first child of the family. If you don't make your bed, you get slaughtered. Isn't that how it is, right? So ata of Allah should not be confused with justice. Justice means you don't do anything good without getting a reward. Either reward with love, that's for the believers, or compensation in this world with no love. Compensation is no love. You pay a plumber. That's it. We're not friends. You came, you fix a toilet, I give you $90. That's it. You leave. We don't see you again. You don't text me hello. I don't text you hello. We have no relationship beyond this transaction. This is how Allah compensates non-believers. What did you do? I fed 1 million people. Okay. We will compensate you the value of feeding 1 million people as a kafir. Right? We'll put statues, they'll name libraries after you, they'll name streets after you, and they'll name elementary schools after you, etc. That's a reward. Another one is a mu'min. He gives Allah his rights, he gets his reward in this life and or the next. That's love. So also, no one oppresses anybody in this world, not even animals, except that there's redress. That's the second portion of justice. There has to be redress. The redress, even the Prophet ﷺ said, if a goat hits another goat, but one had one horn, one had two horns. So that's oppression. Even though animals have no moral, there's no morality for animals. There's no right and wrong. There's no bad animal, good animal. But nonetheless, the result was an unfair fight between the rams. And you know when these rams hit each other is during mating season, which is 2 weeks of mating with all the female ewe. But who gets that flock? They're going to ram each other. And whoever loses, leaves. So if during the year, your flock, you got a flock, and you lost a horn for some reason, next year comes around, a nice young ram is going to come in and smash you. You're going to lose. You lost your flock. That wasn't fair for you. So Allah Ta'ala recreates them in the opposite, and He says, ram one another in the opposite. So even the animals who have no morality to them, there's no wicked and mean animal or bad animal, even them, everything has to be even. Speaking of justice, did you water all 3 plants? Good. Some are volunteers. Got to put them to work. Anything else that needs to be done here? Any odd jobs that we don't want to do? We'll think of something. Keep these kids sweating. Next, he says, in collaborating, we may benefit in the form of increased security, peace, well-being, freedom to practice our religion. This is the number 1. Maslaha in the Islamic terminology refers to what provides benefit and is consistent with the objectives of the Sharia. These objectives are extracted from the totality of the Quran and the Sunnah and refer to in order of importance, protection of one's Islam, life, intellect, progeny, and property. The 5 purposes that Sharia comes to preserve. Number 1 is belief, iman. Number 2 is life. Number 2 is your personal property. Number 3 is your intellect, actually before that. And number 5 is your progeny. So that every child has the right to be born to a mom and dad, and he knows who they are, and they were born in marriage. They had the child through marriage. That's his haqq. And we need to know in society whose kid is who. We have to know this. Whose kid is who? Who's going to take care of them, right? We need to know whose kid is who. That's why friends don't need to get married. Friends never get married. It's because nothing will come out of us that needs to be taken care of financially. But what happens if me and you open a business? We have to have a contract, right? We can't wing it. Me and you, let's start growing oranges and selling orange juice. No contract. Can't do that. Got to have an agreement. Could be oral. Have to have witnesses. Should be written. But you have to have a contract. So once there is a financial gain or loss, right, now we need to have a contract. So likewise, marriage has to have a contract, right? Because when a man and woman come together, they're going to produce something that society needs to be taken care of. Society needs to know. That's one of the many wisdoms of having marriage contracts. So the left, because they spew this this sexual deviance, they're extremely light with criminals. They're totally permissive about drugs, and they want to make lawful all these drugs, right? And they've stunk up the city. Seriously, you go to New York these days, you just can't even walk. Did you go recently?
Yeah, but some friends went and they said you could get high just from walking.
Literally, what did you guys do to New York City? This place stinks, right? Even people who smoke weed think it stinks, right? Everyone thinks it stinks. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I read like an article saying that because of the smoke or something, when you walk in New York City, it's like 7 times worse than actually smoking. It's
terrible. Secondhand smoke probably is worse. Who knows? But because the left are into that, and their generally appearance is very odd. The more woke they get with their appearance is just not fitri related. Blue hair, multiple piercings everywhere, tattoos everywhere, and people just tend not to. If you're a Muslim with a family, you tend not to go that route. So that's sort of obvious. Yet again, on the flip side, they're the biggest, the more progressive, the more pro-Palestine, and the more bold they are in breaking up the American-Israeli alliance, right? Now you go to the other side, they are the biggest Zionists, the biggest Israelis, and there was a brother who published a list of anti-Zionist right wing individuals, the dissident right they call it. Yeah, they're anti-Zionist, but I think both the right and the far right dissidents, all of them have equal views towards Islam. So how am I gaining? Right, how am I gaining? They tend to be pro-family and they're pro-Christian, but the pro-Christian element of it and the pro-European and white element of it is going to render them fully against Muslims. So this is sort of an imagination that there may be a potential that some of the people on the right have a lukewarm spot for Islam and Muslims. I personally don't see it. So we end up being, as the Quran says, min bayni farthin wa damin labanan khalisa, between blood and feces, like in the stomach of the udder of the cow is between where the blood is and where the feces are. Pure milk comes out of that. So we're sort of like that. We're between two groups that each one of them may have something that we agree with and a whole bunch of things that we don't. So I don't see where there's any alliance to either side. Sheikh Abdullah bin Hamid Ali will disagree with that. He holds that there is potential of alliance with the right. I didn't see how he would respond to those, to what I just said about the right, but I'm sure he has an educated opinion. He's a very smart person, if you ask me. I'm sure he has his opinion on that. But nonetheless, I don't see, especially after October 7th, any bridge building with how Zionist the right has become. And the dissident right, the Nick Fuentes types, you think that he wants Muslims around? Right? These are ideologues. It's fun to watch them attack the left. That I enjoy. Right? I enjoy them attacking the left and the wokes, but it stops there. He says here, now he's next step is, after you ensure that the Sharia is not violated in any agreement that you make, you have to check the collaboration. The intent as Muslims is Allah's pleasure. Today in America, we live with non-Muslims while fulfilling the rights due to them as neighbors, etc. And the Prophet ﷺ had the pact of the virtuous, Hilf al-Fudul. It was in a situation where people were being oppressed, and the Prophet ﷺ said he would have joined this pact in which, while reminiscing one day, the Prophet ﷺ spoke of Hilf al-Wudud. He praised the pact and announced that had the same situation, an agreement in joining a common maslaha shared with non-Muslims come up today, he would join it readily. Notice, he said he would join the pact, not the people. He would sign that pact. He didn't say I would ally with the mushrikeen. I would sign that pact. A pact that no person can come and trade with us and get ripped off. He said you sign the pact, not ally with those people. Keep that in mind. It's a big difference. Not only is there no issue with Muslims joining non-Muslims for shared causes, such as eradicating poverty or safe havens for abused women, it may be recommended, or communal obligation based on the situation. The contention lies when, due to our small numbers, weakness, and other deficiencies, Muslim Americans often find themselves in need of collaborating with other groups who may hold ideas antithetical to Islamic morality. Groups may exist primarily to further another belief or lifestyle considered sinful. Not only that, let's talk about when the left is supporting Palestine, they're supporting it on a nationalistic basis, right? So yeah, the not killing, we all agree on. That's fine. That's good. But like, what would their vision be? Like, it's a purely nationalistic vision. Had nothing to do with, at that point, we have no commonality. They would support a secular liberal Palestinian state. So aside from Zionists got to stop what they're doing, right after that, there's a fork in the road. And that fork would be completely antithetical to what Islam and what Muslims would hold for that land. And the Palestinians themselves. The Palestinians themselves are mostly very religious people, although their political parties, they did have in the past very secular political parties. They had in the past very secular, two secular groups. And then there was an Islamic group, and then there is now Hamas. Can we collaborate with such people? What are the conditions? Before we get into this discussion further, it behooves us to first review the Islamic injunction against helping another in disobedience. Near the end of Surah Al-Ma'idah, the second ayah of Al-Ma'idah, Allah says, وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. Help one another towards virtue and towards fear of Allah, and do not help one another in sins and in aggression. From the first part of the quoted line, we may work with people to assist in virtuousness, but the latter part strongly warns against assisting people in sins. You cannot do this. You cannot even increase the popularity of somebody who calls to these things. This is called takthir sawad. You have to be careful of this. Takthir sawad. So you may inadvertently or intentionally lend someone some support or some favorable, or just silence would be enough for takthir sawad, which is the idea of increasing their popularity. You're not allowed to do this. So one example of that is if there is a type of person who's calling to something sinful and unlawful in our religion, and you're cozying up with them. You didn't say anything. You didn't come, but you're hanging out with them, right? The common person might say, oh, he has that view to him, then they must be good. And therefore, their popularity increases. You helped boost them. Can't do this. It's forbidden to do this. I'm going to read really quickly because we have a special guest today, folks. We have a very special guest in the house today, who is a man who's made many films, many successful documentary movies. We're going to interview him today. Very quickly, the Prophet, peace be upon him, the one who directs towards sin is just as the one who commits it. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said. Right? The one who directs towards evil is as one who commits it. Same thing. Where are Allah on the day of judgment? A caller will cry, says the Prophet. Where are those who disobeyed Allah? Where are those who followed them? Where are those who assisted them? And then pen and ink is there to document everything. So keep this very close to your heart when you're thinking about this. And then he gives examples of where Muslims did have collaboration with non-Muslims. Okay. And we'll read those later words today. But first, we will turn to our guest. We ready, Omar?
Yes, sir. We are ready.
All right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We have a guest today who has a very special place in our Islamic community. Very, very few people have done what he's done. He has produced a number of documentary films and spread them across the country. He's produced The Sultan and Saint. He's produced Nadia's Ramadan, Enemy of the Reich, My Fellow American, Inside Islam, What a Billion Muslims Really Think, Talking Through Walls, Prince Among Slaves was one of the most successful films that were produced. City of Light, The Rise and Fall of Islamic Spain, and one of the most popular ones that made it to PBS, Muhammad, Legacy of a Prophet. These are all UPF productions, and our guest today is Alex Kronemer out of Virginia. Welcome to the Nothing But Facts live stream. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure to have you, and let's get straight into this. When you came in to Islam as a convert, there was nothing close to any kind of production that you could show your family, for example, or that you could show your neighbor, or that you would be generally proud of to watch yourself. Can you talk to us a little bit at the time when you came into Islam? What was the vibe like? What was the scene like at that time?
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting question, and it's a long story. But the short version of the story is, I was relatively indifferent to Islam before I was exposed to it. I didn't think about it really one way or the other. If I had any impression of Islam at all, it was through the Iranian hostage crisis. That was, so it was kind of like I just had a sense, a vibe of it being sort of an anti-American, burn the flag kind of thing, but didn't have much other feelings about it, or sense of how Islam was perceived in America. When I became a Muslim, I was surprised to encounter so much hostility to my conversion from family and friends and strangers. And it kind of all came to a head after I was married and was leaving the mosque with my 1-year-old son in a stroller, and a car rolls slowly by, and this guy looks out, white guy like me looks out the window, and I think he wants directions or something, and he just yells, "Go back to where you come from." Drives off, which was puzzling, but I think in part because I had my son, this baby, with me, it really hit me hard of how much antipathy there was towards Muslims. And rewinding back to what I just said earlier, if I was being honest with myself, I could have been that guy in the car. And I recognize that what we call, there's not like, anti-Islamic feelings are not baked into the DNA of America, as they are in some European countries, but they're not in America. What the issue was, and still is to a large degree, is ignorance. People just not knowing who Muslims are, what Islam really is, et cetera, et cetera. And so that was when I first started doing this work, where initially I was doing lectures as a public speaker, and that work took me to an event in Saudi Arabia. And when I returned from the event, when I was on an airplane flying back, I was sitting next to this other white guy who turns out to be a Muslim too, which was like shocking because I thought I was the only white Muslim in the entire world. And turns out his name was Michael Wolff, and he had written a book recently about the Hajj, one American Muslim's pilgrimage to Mecca. And we shared so many things in common in terms of the reaction people had to our becoming Muslim, our desire to try to inform people who Muslims are and what Islam is. And that was when we kind of bonded together to start to make documentaries that could reach mass audiences. When I did my public speaking, I might speak to 100, 200, 300 people. My books might be read by a few thousand, but it felt like there wasn't going to be change on that scale. If we were really going to provide information and understanding, we had to do it on a massive scale, and that's how the film work began.
So you're from Virginia. Are you from the southern part of Virginia, or?
No, I'm not from Virginia, actually. I'm originally from Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania, okay. Which part?
Near Pittsburgh.
Okay, so that's the Pennsyltucky part of it, right?
That's the Pennsyltucky part of it.
Yeah.
Right.
So for those listening from England, Pennsylvania is a neighbor state to New Jersey, but it's huge, and it goes out west. And once you pass Philadelphia, is, I would say, sort of cosmopolitan, right? But then outside of Philadelphia, it does get into the rural parts of the country, which is very pretty, and the people are really nice. But they also, as any rural area in any country, when they don't see a lot of other people, they tend to have judgments, and there's no kickback against those judgments. Like if you go to Egypt and you go to the farmlands of Egypt, it's the same thing. People who don't mix, they easily form negative attitudes towards people, and there's no reaction to that because they don't mingle with those people. So it's not that those people are bad. It's just that they never have a give and take. So their opinions about people are not refined.
I mean, I would add that I don't think you even develop negative feelings. You just don't think about other people. I mean, you think, I mean, it's very interesting because in my town, there were great religious divisions in my town. But they weren't Christian, Muslim, Christian, Jewish. They were Christian. There were the Orthodox, and there was a lot of Orthodox churches in my area. Yeah. Then there were the Catholic churches in my area. Then there was, at that time, what we now call evangelical, but that was just sort of beginning to heat up. So there was the evangelical Protestants who rejected both of them. Yeah. So I actually, we talk about the clash of civilization. I kind of grew up in the clash of civilizations, but it wasn't between Muslims and others. It was within the Christian community. I never even thought about Muslims or Hindus or just name any religion. That was never even on my radar.
Yeah.
So it isn't. It isn't just these more rural or provincial areas breed hostility. They just breed ignorance.
Mm-hmm. And what about, if I can ask you a personal question? So if you're from that environment, how did you even cross paths with Islam? We're talking an era that's well ahead of the internet. Interaction with different cultures and ideas, it doesn't happen automatically the way it does today. And if you want it to happen, it's not easy the way it is today. So how did you end up even crossing paths with Islam?
So that story begins basically in my early childhood. My mother was Christian. My father was Jewish. And they thought about my earliest memories of life of them fighting about religion. Was I could be raised Jewish or raised Christian? And due to that and other reasons, they got divorced when I was only 4 or 5. I had been raised Jewish, or was intended to be raised Jewish up until that period. And then after that, I can remember being, 6 or 7, whereas babies are baptized, I was then baptized, and then was in a Christian environment. So from an early age, I had this sense of kind of the randomness in a way of how you end up one religion or the other. And then in this Christian mindset, encountering, as I said, this sort of Christian hostility to one another made an impression on me. And so by the time I got to college, I was done with religion entirely. In fact, I became, I would call an evangelical atheist. I was very hostile to religious belief and religious people. And that marked my intellectual life through college, but my emotional life was still very much connected to, for lack of a better word, a desire to draw close to the divine, however that was going to be defined. I was not a good atheist because my heart wasn't in it. My head was in it, but my heart wasn't in it. So by the time I was ending college, I just decided that I was studying economics, international relations, but I needed to stop for a moment and really explore this rigorously. And so I went to Harvard Divinity School to study comparative religion, which is what I was doing. When I did very early on, I just realized, great, I'm studying these things through books. I'm having these interesting conversations with people. But again, it's the heart thing. And I started going to various places of worship, churches and synagogues. Even I went to a Hare Krishna center once. But I hadn't gone to any mosque. And again, as I said, my impressions of Islam have been formed by the Iranian hostage crisis. And so I felt like, going into a mosque, I would be greeted with a great deal of hostility. But I kind of convinced myself that I should try and just, see what happens. And so I went, and this is in Boston. There's a lot of mosques in Boston now, but at least at that time, we're talking 40 years ago at this point, the only one that I knew of, the only one I think there was actually, was in the little town outside of Boston called Quincy, Massachusetts. So I took a bus there. It was Ramadan. I know that. And I always remember when I got to the door, I was really scared. And when I got to the door and I'm sort of, straightened my shoulders and went to go straight in, this guy immediately stops me. He tells me to take off my shoes. My first thought was, oh my God, I'm being robbed right here in front of me. But anyway, I took off my shoes, went in, and I found this deep, dark corner to hide in. And I slithered down, and I just was there, feeling very uptight and thinking, okay, noticing things that seemed strange to me, like there's nowhere to sit, people are on the floor. That seemed really odd to me. And this was like sort of before the break of the fast. So people were coming in and doing Sunnah prayer, and I was just watching it. And I remember thinking, okay, I got to stay for about 30 minutes, and then I could say I've been in a mosque, and I've done that. Check that off. And I was watching our clock, and the minute hand was drawing near to 30 minutes when suddenly this door opens up inside the mosque. This guy comes out. I hear the call for prayer, Allahu Akbar, and he's this guy coming out, and my first thought is, looks like he has a Xerox box top, And my first thought was that he's collecting the Muslim ID cards. And I was like, oh God, so I kind of slunk a little more deeply into that corner. And of course, he wasn't collecting ID cards. He was handing out dates. And I had no idea what this was. And I was doing such a good job of hiding that he passed me right by. Didn't even see me. But after he had gone and given dates to a man about 5 feet from me, I was trying to see what was it that was in this guy's hand. And I always remember this guy met my eyes, saw that I was pointed at his 2 dates, and I saw his eyes point to my hands, which were empty. He took 1 date and he handed it to me. And I was really, that gesture really stunned me because, I mean, here's a guy, this is, Ramadan's in the summer, this is a hot day. He's not eaten or drank anything all day. He's just given me 1 of his 2 dates because I had none. I'm not anyone he knows. I'm not even Muslim. And I realized at that point that there was a spirit of generosity in Islam that I had no idea was there. And it made me want to suddenly know, what is this religion? And I went after the prayer was over, which I watched, went back and I got a Quran. And keeping in mind, my Jewish father, there was a great kind of hostility when the divorce finally happened. And I remember one of the things my father, and I never really saw my father after the divorce. And I remember one of the things that my father said was, kind of like pointing his finger in my face. And he was like, you can believe in Abraham and Noah and Moses, but not Jesus. And of course, my Christian mother wanted me to believe in Jesus. And that was one of the divisions that I had inside my heart. I opened up the Quran and, oh my God, there's Abraham and there's Moses, there's Noah, all the things my father had mentioned. And then I turned to a chapter and see there's Mary and there's Jesus, right? And suddenly, we often as Muslims say Islam means peace. But for me, it was real. It was like the first time I felt internally at peace. That here was a religion that brought together these 2 faiths, and also from my atheistic period, appealed to me too. I mean, like God wasn't a guy with a beard, was more, you couldn't define God and all of that, which was a much more appealing and believable idea to me than what I had been fed as a child. So that was it. After not very much more time, maybe a month or 2, I decided that I was going to become a Muslim. I went back to Quincy Mosque and I did my Shahada, and I really, I really didn't know much about Islam yet. I mean, I just knew the basics, but it was enough. And I guess you might say spiritually or emotionally, I was a bit of a drowning man at that point. So all I knew was there had been a life preserver thrown in my direction. I just grabbed onto it. But I'll tell you a funny story. Or maybe it's not so funny, but something that's like a cautionary tale that I like to mention, particularly when I'm doing a talk in mosques and so forth, where everyone always celebrates, oh, we've had 3 people, embrace Islam this month and all this kind of stuff. The problem is there's not support for Muslim converts. At least there wasn't for me. And you do this and you're immediately have family who's against what you're doing. You immediately experience a lot of negativity, and you experience negativity from other Muslims. And I remember back in Quincy Mosque, after becoming a Muslim, my first Friday prayer, and I barely knew how to pray. And when it was over, this guy grabbed me from behind, turned me around, and started telling me all the ways that I invalidated my prayer because I had looked at it this way and I'd done all this. And then I said, well, I've just become a Muslim, thinking that would make him back off or at least be happy. But it made him more aggravated. And he was like, well, how much of the Quran have you memorized, and how much of this, and where's your kufi cap, and where's this, and what's your name? And it really was, it frightened me, to be honest with you. It frightened me not from the point of view of like, wow, I really don't know anything. And I didn't go back to a mosque for another year or 2.
Wow.
And at least in my case, I was still, that initial grasping on held me to the faith. So as I pursued learning and understanding and all of that and grew more confident, I finally could go back to a mosque and interact with Muslims and feel good about that.
Yeah.
But I know of others for whom similar experiences, they left Islam almost immediately. So everyone's celebrating, oh, we got new Muslims, but if you're not protecting them and not just protecting them from the hostility that they might get from family and friends, but also protecting them from other Muslims who might start to put, and this happens with women who convert to Islam all the time, right?
Yeah.
Immediately, you got to wear hijab, you got to do this, you got to do that. You know, forgetting, in my opinion, the essential message of Islam and how it came to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was gradualism, right? The Quran didn't come all at once. It came in pieces. The rules didn't come all at once. They came as people could take on the next one, get comfortable with that. And one of the smartest things that, one of the wisest things that I heard when I was just becoming a Muslim, and I remember talking to a very wise Imam, and to give me advice, and he said, just start with doing one prayer a day. And once you've got that down, once you're good at doing one prayer a day and feel comfortable, then go to the second prayer. Do that. And and he said, like, a lot of new Muslims will burn themselves out by trying to do too much all at once, and then they get overwhelmed. And I thought, I did that. I followed that advice, and that really made a big difference to me too. And also kind of calmed me down. I didn't have to have the whole Quran memorized before I walked into a mosque, and I didn't have to have my clothing a certain way. It was a good thing. Anyway, that's more than what you asked me, but
no, it's a great story. And you know what it reminds you of? That recently, a lot of Muslims think that if you have a convert group, that should be a great support system. But increasingly, I'm finding that that's not even the case, because that's assuming all converts have the same culture, right? Yeah. And America is so diverse. It's not like a convert group in Japan. You have mostly it's going to be Japanese people, because their society is not as diverse as ours.
Yeah.
And when we have a lot of convert gatherings, they would have been uncomfortable if they were both non-Muslim, right?
Yeah.
They don't relate. So even that is a hurdle. You bring all converts, they have total different backgrounds. Their parents have different ethnicities, different politics, different socioeconomic backgrounds. So it's really hard, to put this together. And I think the only solution is a genuine friendship, irrespective of whether that second person is a convert or not.
Right.
That one single genuine friend who you really click with. That's what I found is the best scenario.
Yeah, I agree. I sort of, well, anyway, just to say that that's how I became Muslim. And one of the things that I've come to recognize for most people, if not, I would almost say all people who've ever converted to Islam, it starts with interaction with another Muslim. I mean, I think one of the things that makes Islam is both like a great opportunity, but also a burden on Muslims, is Islam is a faith that's judged by how Muslims behave, more so than really any other faith. And I always say that you could take a Bible, you could drop it in a village that never heard of Christianity, and if you read that Bible, you would understand Christianity, right? Because it's stories that lays out the theology. But if you drop a Quran, you really probably wouldn't understand it at all. You need a Muslim who's living it to really make you understand what the faith is all about. And whether you're living it in a way that's attractive or in a way that's negative, then colors people's opinions about what Islam really is. Yeah. And so I think we're all accountable for that. Ultimately, is how how people we've interacted with, have ultimately judged Islam by how we've behaved and interacted with them.
It's funny that a lot of people from my generation, their second generation, they grew up maybe knowing 5 Muslim families. That's it, and everything else was public schools, TV, your soccer team, everything was with non-Muslims. Then you have your parents, and a lot of that generation, they were soaked in the Islamic culture, but never studied Islam nor took it very seriously. And when that second generation comes and starts learning and starts reading books, their experiences are total opposites. Like one's experience is solely from living with Muslim people, even they knew scholars, right?
Right.
Lived with them, but never studied. The other group only studies and hasn't lived. And it's so funny to see that, they would look and say, that's not right. Like the way you're doing things, there's no way it's right. I guarantee you it's not right. But they can't tell you why, right?
Yeah.
And it's just because they've lived with the people who've done it without studying. Second group studies, hasn't lived with the people.
Right. Yeah, good point.
Yeah. And it's why it's basically the companions, right? Why we have a prophet in the first place is to show us how it's lived.
Yes.
And that's the key. And that's where, the Islam is the one religion that its reputation and its actual reality are so opposed to each other. And as you experience it, it takes only a very small interaction to flip or to break a lot of the stuff that's being said about it, which is a very good lead to your organization. UPF.tv, everyone, is the organization. And if you're listening on Instagram, hop over to the Safina Sadee YouTube channel to see the full screen, because Instagram still gives us a small screen. But we're interviewing Alex Kronemer, who entered Islam. He's from the Pittsburgh area, entered Islam in Boston, and eventually came to forming this organization with Michael Wolff, who was a writer. But was your background in film?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other. Neither was Michael's, actually. I mean, the naivete of a beginner really was. I think if I had known what I know now about filmmaking, I would never have tried to make a film about the Prophet Muhammad. But it's because I knew nothing that made me naively say, well, yeah, sure, well, let's do this. I mean, what happened really was, and there's two parts of that story, one of which relating to something you were just saying a minute ago, but I had, after divinity school, I had returned to my plans of working in economics and international relations, and was actually working in the State Department, which put me into contact with a number of Saudi Arabian diplomats. And through that, I was invited, they knew I was Muslim, I was invited to go on Hajj with the Ministry of Information in Saudi Arabia, and I just write articles about it. That's all they wanted, me and 70 other people from around the world that they brought. It was the first time they opened up the Hajj to journalists. And so that was my first time in actually, it wasn't my first time in Saudi, but it was my first time obviously doing the Hajj. And while I was there, I was reading a biography by, I'm blanking on his name now, Martin. Do you know who I mean? Martin, can't think of his name right now. Anyway, I was reading a biography about the Prophet at the time, which was like really very detailed.
Martin Links, maybe.
Martin Links, thank you very much. And I happened to meet a sort of the swashbuckling Saudi archaeologist who befriended me and took me on a bit of a tour outside of Mecca at places where all these various historical events and the founding of Islam happened. And so I could really, and finally, I ended up working with the CNN crew that was there. Covering the Hajj for the first time. And so in that experience, I was sort of like both exposed to filmmaking, and I saw the power of film. I was exposed to, I was seeing the story, like I was taken to places where I could imagine how we could do the story in a film. And I was reading this book, which my conclusion at the end of it was, wow, this is like a great American story, the story of the Prophet Muhammad. I mean, he's like the archetype of the American hero, right? If you think of the old Western hero, the person who's virtuous and good, going into a bad town, cleaning it up, confronted, tempted, but never failing in his mission and in his goal. And when it rides out, at sunset. And that's kind of like that's really kind of the arc of the Prophet Muhammad story piece. So So I came back from that saying, I want to make a film. And I had met Michael Wolf, as I told the story, just maybe 2 years earlier. And so I called him up very excited and said, hey, you know, what do you think? And he was for it. And so we began, again, naively, how are we going to, you know, coming up with an idea of how we're going to do this. And this is back in the day, you know, when there's not computers where you can, you know, make a Word document and make it look fancy and zip it off. I remember I typed up a brochure, a 3-column brochure, took it to a Kinko's, you know, that place where you could get copies made, folded in 3s, and Michael had a bunch and I had a bunch. And Michael happened to be having dinner one evening with a group of kind of wealthy people who Muslims who were interested in Michael's work, and one of them asked him what he was up to, and he had one of these brochures. He handed it out, and suddenly around that table, the first, you know, few $100,000 to make this film we had. And so suddenly we were, boom, moving forward, and I ended up quitting my job, and we started, you know, slowly accumulating, you know, permissions to do this, permissions to do that. But our biggest challenge was, well, how are we telling this story? It's a story of a person you can't show for an American audience, right? Yeah. We were having a scholars meeting, and we were discussing this and discussing themes we might explore. It was lunchtime, and one of the scholars, who was a woman, was just talking about her son and how he was learning Quranic recitation. And she said it was like, and she made this comment like, wow, this is so interesting because I saw him sitting a certain way while he was reciting, she said. And he was sitting that way because his teacher sits that way. And his teacher sits that way because his teacher sat that way. And there was a chain going all the way back to the life of the Prophet Muhammad. Right? And I remember just thinking, oh my goodness, this is one of the things that makes Islam so unique, is that people consciously are trying to imitate the manners, the habits, the opinions of the Prophet Muhammad. And that's how we tell this story. We tell this story through Muslims who are alive today, who in some way or another, through their lives, are reenacting the Prophet Muhammad. And that gets back to what I'm saying, how Muslims are the ones that really reflect the religion. And so that became the way we made that film. And we're making that film, and 9/11 happened in the middle of it. But we continued to make it. It seemed more important than it ever was before. And when it was eventually broadcast a year after 9/11, by the way, a month after Jerry Falwell, the fundamentalist preacher, had gone on 60 Minutes and called Muhammad a terrorist, our film aired to about 10 million people. And it gave a still shaken American public not only a picture of who the Prophet was, but also a picture of who their American Muslim neighbors, colleagues, and friends were. And something you said way back in the beginning of our conversation about, you know, there weren't any films when I became a Muslim that I could share. We began hearing about people who were using the film. And I remember one young woman writing and thanking us because she was a Muslim woman, and she in college, and she had used the film to really to gather her roommates and her floor mates to watch it, so that they would know who she was and how it really had a remarkable impact. And so that's where we started. So we make films, but we also do a lot of outreach work. We develop all kinds of ways to interact with various groups based on the film, whether it's civic engagement or interfaith work or policy work or whatever it is, because we realize that the film is just the starting point. And till now, I mean, we have films that are 20 years old that are still being used around, not only around the country, but around the world, in peace building and education and so forth, which I think speaks to what Islam really is when it is presented in a way that people can connect with.
That film was one of the first times that Muslims were presenting themselves
Yes.
In the mainstream, because it was on the publicly broadcast, the public broadcast service, which is PBS. Essentially, it's like, what is it, 50% supported by just public funds. It's
Yes.
not like a
not
NBC or
commercial.
ABC.
No.
Yeah. So
And we consciously wanted to be on. I mean, we were looking at one. I forget what the. Anyway, there was some commercial television station that was very interested, but we quickly learned that we were going to have to fit their format, and we were blah blah blah, and we just felt like no, we really want to tell the story. We wanted to tell the story independently, and not be locked into some kind of format.
Yeah, PBS is, for those who don't know, it's a nonprofit TV station that was plugged into every cable network. It was basically part of free TV too. If you had a TV and you just plugged it in and you stuck your antenna back in the day, you got 13 free channels. You had to pay for cable to get all the other channels, but you had 13 free channels. It's basically default TV that was all for free that you got.
Well, you were better than me. In my childhood, we only had 4.
4 channels. Wow, that's crazy. That's crazy. So, and also people have to realize that there was no such thing as, everyone telling their story. And no, it wasn't like that. Your story was told by whoever told it. And you just had to live with that. So when finally someone, especially after 9/11, was known, like known faces, we all had met in Masjid, were on PBS telling the story of the Prophet, peace be upon him. We gave Muslims for the first time a view of what it feels like to tell your own story to the public. I think that was a huge catapult. So that was like an amazing launch for UPF.
Yeah.
Right. And it seems like you never looked back, because you have now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Since 2001 to 2024, you have 12 productions.
12 national broadcasts. We also have 2 theatrical releases.
Mm-hmm.
We also have probably, I would say, 200 small films. Like, as I said, we do these educational work around the film. So we make sometimes small films that support that work. And we also do work in Hollywood.
In where?
In Hollywood.
Oh, in Hollywood. Okay. Like what?
Well, we it's very interesting, because we come at this work as not as Muslims, but as film producers, right? And as a result of that, we're often at award ceremonies and different things like that. Early on, I was sitting at a table with a group of other producers, and what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? And when I said what I did, one of them said, "Oh my God, I wished I knew you a year ago. And it was some popular television show. I forget what it was now, but saying we were writing this and we were going to make the neighbors Muslim, but we just didn't know enough about Islam and Muslims to do that. So we ended up making them Hispanic, blah, blah, blah." Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, what a lost opportunity that is. And again, getting back to the fact that there's not necessarily inbred hostility. There's just like a lack of understanding and knowledge. Mm-hmm. And so around that time, then we're talking about 15, 16 years ago, we developed this program, which we call MOST, standing for Muslims on Screen and Television. And where we provide basically support and information for producers and writers to be telling Muslim stories, developing positive Muslim characters, and so forth for their various television shows. And so we've worked on shows of many very popular television programs, like The Simpsons, Law and Order, Grey's Anatomy, things that are not on TV anymore, but something called The Good Doctor. There was one, I don't know, there's at least 20 or 25 different shows that we've directly impacted, and probably 25 and 50 more that have indirectly been impacted by the work.
Recently there was, not recently, maybe about 5 years ago, maybe, there was news spread about a guy who was from the military, went into a mosque and wanted to blow up the mosque in the rural part of the country. I think it was Indiana. He steps in, and the president of the mosque happened to be there, and he says he welcomes him in, gives him a little tour. I think he gave him some water or coffee or something. And the guy was just totally shocked. He was there to do a recon of what the masjid looked like, so he could actually blow it up. This is former soldier. Was that your production?
No, it wasn't. But I know the people who made that film. It's a 15-minute film.
Yeah.
That we've been trying to promote. It's a really nice film. And the story is really, you summarized the story perfectly. And again, it's sort of like my story. You know, I went in, this person gave me a date, right? I mean, if you think about 12 major films, 100 million people having seen the films, the work we do in Hollywood, all that stuff, it began with some guy giving me a date. Right.
That's crazy.
And that's the story of this gentleman too. I mean, he was kind of like a PSTD person. He had been in one of the wars, God knows which one it was, but he came back just mentally messed up. And yes, that's what he was going to do, but he was befriended and welcomed, and he needed that so much. And he became a Muslim, by the way.
SubhanAllah.
So I forget the name of the story though, but anyway, yeah, it's a very good one.
When you say short films, are they available on UPF's YouTube channel?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, yes, but and also through our website. So if you go to our website, upf.tv, most of the materials that we've developed for use in this dialogues and education are available on our website.
Okay, nice. What was your favorite movie to make?
Oh gosh, you know, that's such a hard question because each one is so different. I mean, we consciously are always trying to tell different stories that can appeal to different audiences. I mean, usually what feels like my favorite movie is the one I'm working on now.
Yeah.
So we're working on now one that we're tentatively calling Islam's Greatest Love Stories. Again, it's one that we're trying to present Islam and Muslims to an audience who largely don't associate Islam and love as being connected in any way.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about romantic love in this film. It's love in a bigger sense. So anyway, it was certainly The Sultan and Saint was certainly I was my directorial debut, let's say, and that was a great film to make. You know, it was literally a cast of hundreds as we recreated the Crusades and the Middle Ages and so forth. It was a very challenging film. Enemy of the Reich is a great film of the heroic Muslim woman fighting the Nazis in World War II. Prince Among Slaves, as you mentioned, probably our most popular film in our backlist. Another great film. But I mean, it's hard to say. They're all great. I mean, in terms of to my heart, they're all great.
As I look at the title list here, some of them are documentaries and some of them are actually movies.
Yeah.
Right? Full-on movies, no documentaries at all. Like Prince Among Slaves.
We made an animated film. Excuse me. We made an animated film called Lamia's Poem, which to your audience, they should look for. We're trying to promote it this year. It was a film that was a bit of a COVID casualty because it was supposed to have its theatrical release and then COVID came in. But it's an animated film about a 12-year-old Syrian girl who's fleeing Syria, and she's given a book of Rumi's poetry. It becomes a magical gateway where she meets Rumi when he was a boy, fleeing the violence of his time, and she helps him write the poem that 800 years later saves her life.
Ajib. Omar, why don't you go to Lamia's, go to the trailer for that, and why don't you load it up, and we'll show the audience right now what the trailer. Trailer's on YouTube, right? Yeah. So while he loads it up, I'm going to ask you another question. It'll take him a second to load it up. Most of these you can get an idea. Enemy of the Reich, you get an idea what it is. Rise and Fall of Spain, Islamic Spain. I got it. What a Billion Muslims Thinks. What does require a little bit of a question is On a Wing and a Prayer. While we load up this trailer, can you tell us what is that about? Is there something happened on a plane or what?
So that was a film that became something different than what we thought it was going to be. So a lot of our films are historical explorations. So there's a fixed history, but there's also a style of filmmaking which some of our films have been as well, which is called Veritas, which is basically you don't know what's going to happen. You're following a person or a couple or something on some kind of journey. So we were approached, this is a few years after 9/11, about this gentleman who wanted to get his flying license, airplane license, and the FBI showed up. And
true story.
It's true story, yeah.
Okay.
And he was going to continue to get his flying license, but he didn't know what was going to happen. And basically, he wanted us to document it, because what if he ended up, arrested?
Oh, nice. Okay.
So that was the original idea. So originally I thought like, oh, this is going to be a, hard hitting. Well, it turned out to be the exact opposite. It turned out to be, I would say, our most comedic of our films.
Oh, that's great.
Because it turns out that the FBI was not involved at all in our period of flying. It turns out that learning how to fly is really kind of hard.
Mm-hmm.
And his wife, and they were kind of like a mismatched couple in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And so just their banter back and forth, and she thinks he's kind of crazy for doing this and that and the other thing. And so it's pursuing the mission by really helping the audience get to know kind of a goofy but endearing guy and his family as he's trying to learn how to fly an airplane.
And people can watch this where can people watch this? On your website?
Again, go to our website as a starting place. I don't know all the like our films you can find some of them on Amazon, some of them on other streaming platforms, but start with our website.
Okay, great.
But that's a great film, by the way. It's as I said, it's a very you smile a lot watching that film.
Nice. Let me tell everybody before we watch this trailer again. Lemmia's poem. It's got a Narnia-esque, a little bit of a Christopher Nolan touch to it, where a girl is 12 years old. She's a refugee, and these Syrian refugees had a really rough time in the past decade. She's fleeing violence in her country, and this age when you have any upheaval, it really shakes up your whole life when you're 12 years old, 13 years old. So she comes upon a book of Jalaluddin Rumi, and as she reads the book, a magical and mystical gateway opens up, and she goes back to Afghanistan. She goes into Afghanistan, wherever Rumi was from at the time, and he is suffering the same exact thing. He's a refugee. She meets him as a boy. She helps him out. He ends up being inspired by her, writes a poem. The magical gateway closes up again, and she benefits from that poem, which he wrote because of her. So that's the Christopher Nolan time loop thing where, but it's a Narnia gateway thing. So it's a really interesting story. So let's take a look at this. Hey, am I going to be able to hear Omar? Okay, good. Let's take a look at this trailer.
The world is full of signs that we often do not see.
You're leaving? I brought you a new one. Do you know who Rumi is? This book, it's special, very special.
My name's Lemia.
Oh, Jalaluddin. But you can call me Jalal.
Jalaluddin? Rumi?
Try to look beyond this moment. You were made a writer because someone somewhere needs your words. It is not our eyes that are blind. It is our hearts.
MashaAllah, this is really good to, I think I have an audience for this in our community to actually show this to them because it looks really interesting. And who helped you write this story? Did you write it yourself, or was it
Yeah, I
Michael
wrote
Wolff's?
it. Yeah.
MashaAllah. What's the length of this movie?
It's an hour and 30 minutes.
Oh, it's a lot of work. So the animation and these are full animations now. So that's some. How do you launch these when you have a movie like this? In the movie world, there's always I don't know, a cinema that picks it up and puts it out there, or a Netflix. So how do you launch?
Yeah, so the main way you launch is at film festivals, major film festivals, where people buy it, in essence. And as I said, our launch happened in the middle of COVID. And there actually was screened at this film festival that was largely virtual, and there were no buyers, and so it never got a theatrical release. And even till now, theaters are struggling.
Yeah,
It is available to stream, but having that initial theatrical bump is important. So what we are doing this year is we are promoting screenings of the film ourselves, tying it to Refugee Month, tying it to, well, many things. And so we've had several dozen screenings, some very big, some only 30 people, and we're going to continue pushing that this year.
that's great. So how can we sign up for a screening at our community center?
Oh, easy. Just let one of us know that you want to do it, and we'll be happy to organize that for you.
Okay, that's great. So that'll be a nice screening at the start of the school year, and we'll pull out a lot of families, and we have a big gym, can seat about 100 or so.
And the thing that's very interesting about the film, I wasn't thinking about it at the time. The film has, it has scary scenes. There's war, there's monsters in it, and so forth. And I kind of was thinking, this is not really for kids. It doesn't have any talking donkeys. But I have found that little kids love this film. And I realized inadvertently they love it because it has the Disney arc, which is a mother. If you think of most Disney movies, the mother is lost or gone. And then all these, because, it's sort of like, in a little kid's mind, if there's a mother present, nothing bad can happen. So
yeah,
adventure begins when the mother's gone, right?
Yeah.
And in her story, same way. But at the very end, her mother comes back. And if you think of every Disney movie, Beast dies and suddenly he's resurrected. Wally's got his computer's broken, but suddenly he's Wally again. There's that moment of loss and then return. Yeah. And at the end of this film, the mother comes back. And I think that's where the kids just love. They're on this scary adventure. Lamia does okay, but then she finds her mother at the end. So it's good for kids. It
also has the animation looks like some of the Disney movies that they're watching. So the animation is really sharp.
Yeah. The interesting thing about animation too is in terms of things I didn't know, every second of film in an animated film is 24 drawings.
Say again?
Every 1 second.
Yeah.
Is 24 different drawings.
That's insane.
It is insane. Yeah, we had 70 people, 70 animators worked on this film.
So 60 times 24, what's the math on that? Some of you guys are into math. 120, right? Plus more. No, I mean 1,200 and more.
Yeah.
So let's say 1,500 a minute times 90. Huh?
Yeah.
1,420 times 90. Just do it times 100, might as well. Call it a day. 14,000 images, right?
Yeah.
14,000 drawings. That's insane. Okay, here's a question that's controversial in the art world. Do you plan to use AI?
No, we don't plan to use AI. And it is. I don't know if it's controversial. It's highly charged.
Yeah.
Because AI threatens to put a lot of artists out of work, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And at the same time, I can understand why it's irresistible to a lot of people because it's cheap.
Yeah.
But no, we don't plan. And you might find interesting that PBS doesn't accept any AI in their submissions.
Are there actors and guilds now that have conditions like that? Like, we're not going to work with you.
Oh yeah, well that was part of the big actor strike. That was part of what that was all about.
Yeah.
That their images were taken and now they were going to be used, reproduced and by AI to act out things, and less for stars, but for background actors.
Yeah.
There's people have careers in this business without being stars.
Yeah.
They're just they're always being hired to be in the crowd scene, this, that, and the other thing. And so they have a whole career in Hollywood doing that kind of work. And if suddenly you don't need them anymore, well, you've added 90% of the working actors.
Yeah, most people think about Hollywood stars. They think of the Hollywood actors. They think of the star, but then there's a lot of, non-star faces in every movie you see. There has to be. Sure. You can't have a handsome mailman, for example. You can't have. There's got to be a regular dude. Yeah. At a cash register or something like that in those scenes. So those guys are usually taken. We don't think about them. I want to ask you about a couple more stories. Great Muslim American Road Trip. All right, what is that all about?
Okay, that's a film that your audience should really watch. It's a 3-part film. It was on PBS, not this last summer, but not summer before. It's a story. It's some of your audience may know Mona Hyder, the rap singer.
Okay, I'm familiar with the name, but I can't remember who she is.
Yeah. She's Syrian American. She's produced a number of Muslim-oriented rap songs. And her husband Sebastian Robbins, he's a convert.
Okay.
They take a trip along Route 66,
like cars.
The car trip.
Yeah.
And they find the American Muslim story along that most American of routes. You wouldn't think that on this iconic American route there'd be anything to do with Islam.
Yeah.
But just about every mile, there's something related to Muslims that they discover. That's an example of a very tough film, by the way. There's a lot of discovery that happens over those, everything from blues, the origins of the blues and jazz, to a Muslim who 40 years after Columbus was the first person to lead a group across the Southwest and map out that thing.
Wow.
That area, including a Muslim who was responsible for mapping out the last two states of Route 66. Route 66 itself owes itself to a Muslim.
Wow.
So that's like the discovery over and over in this film. And it's got music in it. It's very upbeat. We made it to appeal to a younger audience. So it's a very good film. So
when you do those, you just got to be ready to improvise because you never know what's going to happen, right? Yeah. And I remember one documentary about a guy who was charged with murder. And then in the middle of the documentary, there was a mic left on him, accidentally on. And he's talking to himself. And in the talking to himself, he says to himself, well, what if they ask you if you did it? He said, just tell them I did it. Actually, no, you can't say I did it. And he's talking to himself. So these guys are putting the movie together, and his mic is left on like weeks later because the post-production takes a long time. The guy admitted to doing it, and that was used in court, used against him. So talk about these types of on-the-go improvising. You never know what you're going to come upon. You can come upon something totally crazy, right? And that just takes the movie through the roof.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, that's a big part of it. And also just, I mean, if you think about it, on that particular film, we traveled 3,000 miles.
Wow.
So think of all the things that can happen on a 3,000-mile trip. Right?
Yeah.
When you have cameras and people and, so on and so forth. And
batteries and all that. Yeah.
Getting set up and breaking down and getting to a place at a reasonable hour to get a night's sleep before you get back early next morning on your road again.
Did you actually go with them too?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
I directed.
Route 66, where does it start again?
Starts in Chicago
Okay.
and goes to Los Angeles.
So it's diagonal like this.
It goes down, cuts across the Texas Panhandle, and then begins to move up until it hits LA.
Oh, so it actually goes very steep south first, and then it goes across.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's why in Cars he ends up in that New Mexico area.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, try it. You can get a filming of Lemia's poem. Go to upf.tv. This was Alex Kronemer, the founder, co-founder. His partner is Michael Wolf. Maybe that's someone else we should have on. But Michael Wolf is a writer. Alex Kronemer is a co-founder of this, former journalist, now turned into filmmaker. These are, some of them are documentaries you see here, and some of them are actual full-fledged movies, and now you have an animated production. So always exciting stuff coming out of UPF, but always top quality. And we'll really thank you for coming on. And inshallah, we're going to have a showing of Lamia's poem here in New Jersey, and we'll announce that, and people could come through to that. So thank you, God, for coming on. Jazakallah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thanks a lot. There you have it, folks. You know, we're always into the arts. I'm always into the arts, and I'm always into health and fitness and these types of things. And this organization is probably, I would say, the best in film production because they've been consistent too. There's a lot of people who come out with one or two things and then they stop. But UPF is very consistent, and it's consistent because it has leadership. That's why, committed leadership. So let's take a look at some of the comments and questions here. Farhan never heard the name Lemia before, and it's a pretty popular name between Morocco and Sham. Right. All right, we can take some general questions for a few minutes, and then we're going to bounce, and we'll be back. Today's Thursday, right, Omar? Oh, gee, lost track of the days these days. How do I respect my parents? I always forget. Well, when a person is good on their prayer, then Allah Ta'ala reminds them, and He sends them reminders. So I would say, be good with your prayer, and Allah Ta'ala will send you reminders of everything. But ultimately, why don't you study it too? Why don't you get a book? There's a book called The Rights of Parents. Let's get another photo, Omar. That photo's a bit no good. Let's get another one. Omar's making the thumbnail, as you all know, and I get to watch him make the thumbnail. I gotta make sure I look good in these thumbnails. At least decent. They go back. Yeah, close. Click around 10 seconds before or after that. The other angle. Do the other angle. Facing the other side. Yeah, facing that side's better. Yeah, I guess that's my good side. Or the front is fine too. Yeah, it works. That's good. Where's this shawl from? It was a gift. But if you want shawls, Yemeni Threads is your place to go. Go to www.yemenithreads.com. Is there a spiritual treatment for anxiety? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ala bi dhikrillah tatma'innul qulub. Verily, by the remembrance of Allah, hearts find tranquility. What's the greatest remembrance of Allah? Tawbah. Tawbah from sins. What's the next greatest remembrance of Allah? Equal to that is salah. 100%. There's no discussion, no doubt about it. The prayer. You got to observe salah. Do topical face products need to be dhabiha if they have animal products? No, because istihala will have occurred there. Istihala. Complete transformation of the essence. So you don't have to worry about that. Should Bangladesh be considered a khilafah? When will ArcView registrations reopen? Maybe 2 weeks. Inshallah. What is the minimum standard someone to be a practicing Muslim? Praying 5 times a day, not doing sins in public like having a liquor store or working in an industry that's forbidden. And your external, the first thing the Sharia requires from us is the external, the actions of your body. And then we work on the internal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, Allah does not charge a soul more than they can bear. Okay. Because the Sahaba asked Allah not to charge them with what they cannot bear. And what is that meaning? The meaning of that is that in the beginning, Allah says, لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَإِن تُبْدُوا مَا فِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَوْ تُخْفُوهُ يُحَاسِبْكُمْ بِهِ اللَّهِ. If you do something or you hide it in your heart, Allah takes you account for it. So the Sahaba said, oh Allah, we can't control our hearts. Sometimes our hearts, we say to ourselves terrible things. Bad thoughts cross our mind all the time. So then the Sahaba prayed, لا تؤاخذنا ربنا لا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملت على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به. Oh Allah, don't take us to account on something we can't control. You can't control your thoughts. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removed that charge. That charge that He will take you to account for your thoughts, that's been removed. Allah does not take us to account merely for our thoughts. Except if you dwell upon them and it's a filthy thought, that's discouraged. However, dwelling upon a thought oftentimes will produce an action. It will become an action. So you have to be careful of that. Joseph David says, what is the position in Maliki fiqh on Salat al-Subh, Maghrib, Isha in extreme territories? You're going to pray according to the most nearest city that prays normal prayers. So let's say you go to the, what do they call it? The polar night, I believe, in Norway, where the sun sets and doesn't rise until 3 months later. So what do? They have artificial clocks, obviously. They have clocks, they have phones. And so it'll be like 2 in the afternoon and it's like pitch black. So if you're a Muslim and you live there, you're going to pray according to the next nearest city that prays. So I guess maybe you would go to Oslo or something where they pray all 5 prayers. And you go according to that. And some have said you go according to Mecca, whatever it is. You calculate it artificially and you pray on time. My daughter is in Hifz school, mashallah. She turns 16 next month. What is the next move after she is done in 2 years? Well, in terms of the Hifz, you still are going to do you do a second Hifz or a review, however you want to do it. Some people do a full second Hifz. In other words, they start over and do it again. Or they just do a review. Every other day, recite a juz to the sheikh or half a juz. That's actually more important than actually just doing the hifz, because otherwise you can really lose it quick. What if someone is confused about different Islamic Aqidah schools? Each has its own evidence. So certainty is hard. Belief can't just be about picking what you like, right? So for Abdul Latif or Abid al-Lutfi, sorry. The answer to that is that a common Muslim is not bound or charged to know these things. All you have to know is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you obviously believe in Allah and His Messenger, and there is none like unto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He's the creator of all things, and these basic fundamentals. Now, if you are curious and you're someone who wants to know the answer, and I need to know this, then you don't study issue by issue, you study the scholars until you determine which scholar is most worthy of following. And then you start to learn from them. And we can talk about living and, more importantly, the dead. So if it was madhabs of Islamic law, you're not going to study the Maliki rulings and the Hanafi rulings and the Shafi rulings. That's not how it works. You're going to study Imam Abu Hanifa, his biography, and his methodology. Malik, his biography and his methodology, Shafi and Ahmed, and then you're going to decide. Why do we cap it off at those four? Those are the only four whose schools are still alive with a tradition of people still teaching it and preserving and making sure that they're transmitting what in fact that Mujtahid Imam said in methodology and in the actual rulings. So you do the same in Aqidah. And in Aqidah, you may study the major theologians of the school. You may study Imam al-Ghazali, his life and his methodology. And say, yes, he's worthy of following. You may study Imam al-Nawawi. Imam al-Nawawi, there's not much about his biography, but when it comes to his works, there's plenty to study and plenty to read. And so, to me, Imam al-Nawawi is almost like, in right after the four Imams, from the most agreed upon, safest, most accurate scholar, simplest to read, but also copious in, or I should say, the amount of output, prolific, I should say, right? Prolific, but yet simple and accurate and connected to the sources, as and yet he came later, so he is exposed to other masail. He's exposed to a lot of issues. It's the Imam al-Nawawi. His Sharh al-Muslim he wrote when he was very early on. Very early on. Shafi'is don't rely upon his Sharh al-Muslim for their fatawa. They rely on his fiqh books for the fatawa. So if you see Shafi'i opinions there, you're better off double checking it in the Shafi'i fiqh manuals. And he wrote the one. He wrote the book in Shafi'i fiqh. This big. His Sharh al-Muslim is this big. And Sharh al-Muslim, his first source was the Maliki scholar Qadi Iyad. He took from him first. And he always says, Qala al-Qadi, Qala al-Qadi. He wrote that when he was very young. And he never had to retract anything or take anything back. Just goes to show how accurate he was from his youth and how prolific he was from his youth. I mean, he was beyond gifted. He was like genius level. He never married. He died very young. I think he died at 45, believe it or not. He had no family. So day and night, he taught at his school and he wrote day and night. And he died at 45. He has an output of work. People, if they live 90 years, won't produce that. How are the surahs named, says Helena Akhtar. Good question. The surahs were named by the Prophet ﷺ or by the next generation. Or they have come to him in news from, I guess, Angel Jibreel. For example, how did the Prophet know about the reward of reciting Baqarah and Ali Imran come in the form of birds, giving you shade on the Day of Judgment, but also pointing you in the right direction? Clearly, Sayyidina Jibreel told him that, right? Do you know Sheikh Abu Bakr Musaliar? I believe, of Kerala, India. I believe I met him once he came here. What is the Islamic view of law of attraction and manifestation? There's only one thing that they say that I believe is actually just good human advice, which is just to be constantly optimistic and persistent in seeking your goals. Beyond that, we don't charge ourselves with having to attract anything. We have a faster route to that that'll make you not have to worry, which is through dua. The law of attraction is extremely stressful. You got to constantly meditate about the thing, constantly think about the thing, and imagine yourself as some power that's attracting. We don't really do this. Our methodology is, in terms of the doctrine of taking the means, al-akhdhu bil-asbab, taking the means. Commonsensically, I can't take the means if I'm not thinking about it, right? If I'm not emotionally attached to something and connected to something, I'm not going to work hard for it. So that's sort of also a commonsensical observation that we would agree is you have to be emotionally involved with something in order for you to keep going and to keep working at it and to leave no stone unturned. But other than that, the main portion that we have to separate from is we don't rely upon ourselves, and this makes us relax. I got to work. I got to do the work. I got to want it, but ultimately it's Allah who's going to bring it to me. And one moment of dua at the right time can take the place of thousands of hours of me imagining, I'm meditating, and I'm attracting, and I'm manifesting. This is all magical thinking that comes upon a people when their economy stinks. This is a fact. When the economy of a people starts collapsing, they fall into racial tensions and magical thinking. Racial tension because they got to blame somebody. And magical thinking because there's no actual work being done anymore. Right? Show me this nonsense in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. No, the people worked. You had opportunities. Huh? And magical thinking. Right? I got to meditate my way to money. It's not going to work. You're going to work your way to money. But I do recognize and they don't always say that. They do say that you got to work. But point being is that aside from one or two things that are sound observations, we don't need much of it beyond that. Hassan Farhan al-Maliki, what's your opinion? Never heard of him. Never heard of him. Hassan Farhan al-Maliki, never heard of him. That doesn't mean anything because if I haven't heard of him, but we could look him up. What are you asking for? Why is he asking about Hassan Farhan al-Maliki? Let's see, maybe he has some good videos, good books on Maliki fiqh. Bismillah. Hassan Farhan. Oh. Hassan Farhan al-Maliki is a Saudi religious reformist thinker who was arrested, put on trial, arrested for a number of reasons. His opinion about the veracity of certain sayings attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His criticism of 7th century Islamic figures, which are what? Sahaba. Insulting the country's rulers and describing them as extremists, supporters of ISIS. He praises Hezbollah. This has nothing to do with Maliki fiqh. It's just his name. I'm sitting there like wondering if they're going to benefit from him. No, I have nothing to do with this stuff. Yeah, no, I'm sitting here thinking, huh? Yeah, I mean, it's nothing to do with Maliki fiqh. So, what's the way of getting rid of laziness and waswas? Well, start picturing goals that you want. Reward. What does the Quran move us? How does the Quran move us? Reward and harms. Benefit and harm. So you have to, and this is one thing they're good at, these law of attraction types, is visualization. You got it. And that's a natural thing. So some of the things they're saying are just natural observations. The more you visualize a reward, the more you'll be happy. You'll work for it. You get excited for it. You need to visualize yourself some rewards. If I pray qada, does it have to be out loud? You got to pray the qada exactly how you missed it. So if you're doing qada of Isha, you do it out loud, even if you're doing it in the middle of the day. What is Jamaati Islam? No clue. I think it's a group from Pakistan, but I don't know much about them, to be honest with you. It's Abu al-Ala al-Mawdudi's group. Ikna, basically, is their version of that today. But I don't know much about them, to tell you the truth.
Someone in the mosque was telling me about Jamaat al-Islam. He was saying basically is people at the mosque who just follow what the mosque does.
What?
That's what he told me.
No, Jamaati Islami is a massive group. It's led by the Abu al-Ala al-Mawdudi's, may Allah have mercy upon him. And he had a lot of books, and those books are found in the Masjid all the time. And their group today is Ikna. They do a lot of good work. Good people. Here's a question. What's your advice if someone allows or tolerates or participates in social activities with openly sinful, disobedient Muslim family? They openly drink, smoke, and want kids to be close to that family? Nah, not if they're doing that stuff. If you openly do that stuff in your house, then sorry, we're not coming to those gatherings. Sorry to break it to you. But if you're openly drinking, la, I have to cut you off. By the way, the saying about birr al-walidain or silatul rahim, and no, a Muslim doesn't leave his Muslim brother for 3 days. These are all, you don't abandon your Muslim brother for 3 days if, oh, that's nice. Colorful. Really colorful, bro. That's if. You're not allowed to abandon your brother, Muslim brother, for 3 days on matters of the dunya. But if it's matters of deen, right? You guys got to go? Good. Alaikum salam, Imam. Alaikum salam. If it's matters of deen, yes, you can abandon them. You can. And invitations. The question about invitations, a Muslim cannot, it must answer the invitation of another Muslim. Ibn Mas'ud was invited to a wedding that had a lot of sinfulness in it, and he didn't go, and someone asked him about that hadith. He said, not these. We weren't commanded to attend these gatherings. Silatul rahim, if there's no harm. Silatul rahim. But if there's harm, and your kids are now, hey, if there's no harm, and your kids are now exposed to alcohol, no. Go to the colorful one, Omar. Free mixing, it's AI, bro. Oh, no, blur it, just blur it. There's also a big mosque on the stage, so how does that make sense? But anyway, put that. I like that picture. It's a mess, but you're going to blur it anyway, right?
No, I don't, because it looks weird on the eyes.
Okay. Yeah, but we need some. The other one was fine too, but it's not colorful. What age do you advise children to be taught to read Arabic by looking? As soon as they can, really. The earlier the better with these things. Earlier the better on these things. How do you find a one-on-one HIFT program for adults on the Northeast? Are you asking for one-on-one online? That we can find probably, but one-on-one in person, that's tough. Is it permissible to not marry? You can actually probably ask your local imams and qadis if they'll come to your home, but you're going to have to give them a good sum. Is it permissible to not marry for achieving some great goal, like to be like Qadi Ayyad? I wouldn't do that in this day and age. Just too much fitna in this day and age. Can I work as a spy in a non-Muslim country?
What is the ruling of being a spy in Islam anyways?
If they're the enemy, enemies don't have the same rights, right? But it's a good question. I can't answer that right away.
Can we apply the laws of Sun Tzu, like art of war, in our day-to-day life, or like for Muslim military?
You're gonna have to have. There has to be. You have to see what the Sharia says, and I'm sure that there is some. There is some kind of role for that. Hey, that's a great thumbnail, Omar. But take that 1920s film thingy out of there. Yeah, that doesn't belong there. Yeah. If the Imam of the prayer does a mistake, do the people follow him? Yes, they do, except one mistake, which is going up for another rak'ah. That they don't do. You stay seated and you say subhanallah. Which one is the lesser evil in politics, the right or the left? Pick an STD. That's the answer to that question. One, all right, they'll be tolerant of hijab. They'll be some of them pro-Palestine, not all of them. Some of them pro-Palestine. But the more pro-Palestine they are, the more pro-what they are? Like Maliki. So where are we going to go with this, right? We can't get too close to this either, right? I'm laughing about allying with these groups. Are you allying with them in your imagination? Like, what do you Muslims have to offer that's so, oh, the Muslims are coming, we got to prepare, right? No, it's not like this. It's like taking crumbs from the table. Seriously. Maybe in the future, Muslims' numbers will be much bigger and there will be, a reason, some kind of a purpose, right? Or some negotiations that we could do. No, is that the final picture, Omar?
Not yet. Anything else?
No, I like that picture, but why am I looking sideways like that?
Oh, yeah.
Let's get. Is there another option? Woman says she doesn't ever want her husband to tell her what to do or where, and she wants to do whatever she wants. Well, is this in theory, or is this actually has already happened? Because it says her husband, meaning her future husband, or is this in theory? Well, she has to do what Allah says, and the husband has to tell her what Allah says, and the husband has to insist upon the obligations and prohibitions, right? So the husband will only insist upon what you already know, right? That what is halal and haram in whatever she's talking about here, what to do or where, right? And if there's a judgment call, then you have to discuss that, right? So the permission to work as a car dealer. They sell cars on interest. In general, you're allowed to sell something if they're going to pay for it in cash or by interest. That's not your business. What's the Aqidah of Imam Malik? Imam Malik was severe against the Mubtadi'ah in Aqidah. Severe. And he studied he had a teacher that he had for over 30 years that he used to go to. For 30 years. And that teacher was a specialist in matters related to al-bid'ah, the heretical groups. So Malik was severe against any bad feelings, let alone bad words against the companions. Right? Severe against the emerging i'tizali, kalami, mu'tazili thought that contradicted clear verses and hadiths. And he was severe against those who delved into the mutashabihat, as the one who asked Allah Ta'ala, asked him what is the meaning of istiwa on the throne. Right? And he said about it, it's not maqul. It's not even something that even can be discussed. So he was very severe. And that's why As-Subki says, of all the madhabs, each madhab did have a small group of their scholars in their history go astray on something. So there were Hanafi Mu'tazilites, Shafi'i Shi'is, and Hanbali Mujassima and Mushabbiha. But he says you find none of that with the Malikis. They were extremely strict on all these things. What's the go-to fatwa book in Maliki fiqh? It's the first one is Khalil, and then the Dusuqi after that. Hashiyat al-Dusuqi. It's Dusuqi upon Dardir upon Khalil. Akhdari, it's one of the beginner books. Yeah, the beginner books are 3. Ashmawiya in Egypt only they study that. In the West they don't know that. In the Maghrib they don't know that. But Ashmawiya, Akhdari, Ibn Ashir. Those are 3 very popular beginners books. There's Waghdisiya, but it's not as popular as the other 3. Then after that you go to Matn al-Risala, but you have to read Risalat ibn Abi Zayd with a sharh, such as Nafrawi. Why? Because Ibn Abi Zayd, it's the most blessed book in the madhab, no doubt about that. Risalat ibn Abi Zayd, many say about it, it's the most blessed book. But they do say about it that he does have some things in there that is contrary to the mashhur. So you need to read it with Nafrawi's commentary or other Adawi's commentary on it. And then after that you read Aqrab al-Masalik by Sidi Ahmed al-Dardir, which consists probably about 75,000 masail. Then you go to Khalil, which is about 300,000 masail. Then you go to the Shuruhat of Khalil. And Sharh al-Kabir is Dardir's Sharh on Khalil. Al-Sharh al-Saghir is his Sharh on his own book, Aqrab al-Masalik. And then you have Hashiyat al-Dasuqi upon Dardir, upon Khalil. And that's in Shinqit and Algeria, they study Khalil, Hashiyat al-Dasuqi. And that's their go-to. Can a woman have ever been married without her consent? Yeah, it would be valid. It would be a valid marriage if a dad did that. That's a matter of urf and custom. Right? I know that's going to surprise a lot of people, but if the parents, they know what's best for their daughter, but that's a matter of urf. I don't think that would ever happen today. So urf is the custom of those Muslims. I haven't heard of that ever happening today, but if he did that, it would be a valid contract. Any chance you can come to the Netherlands? Is there something to do in the Netherlands? No. I'll come if there's people to teach. Yeah. If there's a decent, it doesn't have to be a big group, but every summer I like to go somewhere. Maybe it can be Malaysia this year, maybe South Africa, whatever upstanding and competent organization. I'd love to go and see these, basically just to see our ummah, connect with our ummah. Vancouver.
Okay, Eskimos out there, Vancouver.
Maliki in musical instruments in Maliki method, all of it's haram except for the duff and weddings by women. For me, the go-to book immediately is Nafrawi on Risala. Of course, Aqrab al-Masalik is what I'm studying now at my Sheikh, Mahmoud Shabib.
Someone has a question in the chat.
What is it?
It's like, I'm having suicidal thoughts. Everything fell apart so quick.
Billah.
My health, my mental, my emotional. I need advice. I keep thinking, what if this didn't happen? I would have been good.
La, you need to talk to somebody. But don't do that. Don't go back and what if this happened? What if that didn't happen? Don't do that. But you need to talk to somebody. And you need to have somebody reassure you about everything. Okay. What's the best Aqidah book for beginners and intermediates? Let me get you the exact. They're Jawhar al-Tawheed, you know it's translated. And let me get you exact title of the book. Here, Jawhar al-Tawheed, English commentary by Ali Khalfi. Or Khalaf, maybe? I don't know what it is. Okay, it's called Jawharat al-Tawheed by Ali, is spelled A-L-L-I-E. And that covers a lot. Covers a lot. Okay. Ali spelled A-L-L-I-E, Khalfi, K-H-A-L-F-E. A couple more questions, then we wrap up. Imam Malik's view on trimming the beard. Go to Maliki Fiqh QA and you'll see that answer there. MalikiFiqhQA.com. That's again, we took that from Nafrawi and Qadiyah and others. Yeah, he allows you to trim your beard. You have to have a beard though. Muhammad Hassan, go to somebody quick. Go seek help from an Imam and counseling and mentorship. And you'll get on the right track, inshallah. If someone sees the Prophet in a dream, does that mean he's safe in matters of belief and Aqidah? Is your mic on? Yes, your mic on.
Like even some non-Muslims have seen Prophet. There's many stories I'm sure you've heard. Like there's one of the Lebanese Christian girl who saw him, and then she turned Muslim.
So
things like that.
hopefully that the future is good. We can say that. Hopefully the future of that person is good, but doesn't mean at that moment he's perfect, right?
And I, personally, like, this is anecdotal kind of, I understand, but I know many people that have seen the Prophet ﷺ, and like they're not exactly like scholars, or they, half the time they don't even know what they're doing, like.
Hopefully that means that person has a good future, bi'idhnillah. But you can not ever have jazm about anybody. Yeah, speak.
Question. If someone's from the Prophet's family, someone was telling me that there's no, like, nowadays, like, if they're from the Prophet's family, like, there's no way that they can end up misguided or even become non-Muslim. Is that true?
Nah, that's not true. It's not true.
Yeah, I was like shocked. I was like,
It's not true.
he's like they may, upon a point, like, become non-Muslim or misguided, but at the end of their life, because he's like, there's no way that they can end up in.
No, that's not true. I never heard anything like
always
that.
going to heaven.
I never heard that. Allah, I don't know.
I don't know.
Sri Lankan here. Are you a Mupla or a Malalayal? What? What? I'm neither, bro. I guarantee you I'm neither. Any Sri Lankans here know what the heck he's talking about? No, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm not either one of those things. Don't call me that. Huh?
Tale Brazil, you guys?
Yeah.
No, he's asking someone else.
I'm second somebody else. Okay. I'm not that, and don't call me one of those.
No, he was talking to someone else.
Okay. Sadl and Qabd in the Maliki school. Go to safinasadi.org/Sadl, SADL. What else can we read about? Who are some other Maliki scholars that the younger generation might not know about? Well, I think there's a lot, but we just talked about Sayyid Muhammad al-Maliki, but keep in mind, his world was not fiqh, it was hadith and aqidah and tasawwuf. Well, we can do a lot of different, Sheikh Ahmad Taharayan, I would say. His thing is, scholars, their biographies, or it's their works really that matter more than their biographies. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we will wrap up here. Does the Quran give us a flat earth or a round earth? I would say there is no explicit statement that the earth is flat or round, because yes, Allah said that He basata, used the word bast, but that is true, because you look out and you see a flat plane of grass that you can build on, right, or lay down on. So that could be the meaning of that. Doesn't mean the whole thing is flat. And we have the takwir, the verses of takwir of the earth, or of the sun around the earth, or of the sun. So a takwir is it points to roundedness. Is an explicit statement? No. Also, what about our own eyes? Does not the Quran uphold observable knowledge? Allah upholds observable knowledge, right? And we clearly see pictures of a round earth. And we are not a people who deny observable knowledge. Otherwise, you become like Christian scientists or something like that. They deny observable and demonstrable knowledge. So, Christian scientists, yeah. They deny observable and demonstrable knowledge. Yeah. And we're not, transmission is not the only source of knowledge in Islam. Allah Ta'ala commands us to these other sources of knowledge, provided that they don't contradict. A proper observation of nature will not contradict the book, because the authors are the same. Ladies and gentlemen, we're wrapping up here. Jazakumullahu khairan. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
ateşi